For Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last Wednesday night, the Kyabram Club saw a packed house of hundreds of farmers and business people who'd gathered to express their deep concern about their loss of access to affordable irrigation water in northern Victoria and southern New South Wales. Some had driven hours to get there from Deniliquin and Griffith. Others had driven from further west in the system from around Boort, home to the biggest and best olive groves in Australia. And closer by, around Kyabram, we had representatives of the biggest and best dairy farms, fruit and tomato growers. These hard-working men and women were there because they are so deeply distressed about their own families, their communities and their enterprises. We began with a prayer and ended with a poem penned by one of the organisers, Loretta Warren. This summed up the despair and loss felt by so many. It is not drought and flood that's seeing the productivity of this part of the Murray-Darling Basin plummet, and the debt that's once again climbing to unacceptable levels. It's not commodity prices or lack of demand for the fine foods, the dairy, fruit, olives, rice, meats, oilseeds. In fact, manufacturers are turning away offers for supplying more infant formula, more oilseeds, more meats, apricots, rice, fine lamb. The tragedy is that the loss of nearly half of the irrigation water out of the GMID is a result of decisions first made by the Gillard Labor government, partnered with state governments, who apparently had no idea or did not care about the economic, the community, the other social and environmental impacts of transferring huge volumes of water out of the Murray-Darling Basin production to be flowed instead out to the sea. The VFF came in for a particular caning on the night. They were seen as not caring, not there, not speaking up. Interestingly, the local water committee representative wasn't there, Mr Richard Anderson. He's since flayed about and suggested that all I'm saying is that no more funding should go to the closing down of the system. Instead, what I'm saying is that the project that has $1 billion of federal funding has in fact, as per the mid-term review, as recommended by that independent review, which was commissioned by the state and federal government, that mid-term review says this project, shutting down half of the irrigation system of northern Victoria, it must be reset. It was shocking to read in that mid-term review that the business case does not refer to the impacts on irrigators or their enterprises come the removal of half of the water, or the impacts on the viability of the irrigation system itself should there be a removal of half of the water, 45% of the channels. This is extraordinary. I'd have loved to have read that business plan. I still want to see it, but it's a best-kept secret. I have tried to get that business case for the $1 billion that Tony Burke, then Environmental Minister, signed up to with the state government, demanding 204 gigalitres be passed from the irrigators to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. That business case for that deal is secret. I've tried to get it under FOI from the state and the Commonwealth. I have been refused. Apparently, as I said, the business case does not refer to the impacts of taking away that water through shutting down the system on the farm enterprise itself or on the viability of what was the biggest irrigation system in Australia. That is extraordinary. Taxpayer-funded monies, after all, for an infrastructure project, not a secret submarine plan or how the federal police operate. A $1 billion federally funded piece of irrigation infrastructure, its business case is secret. Now, there's a reason for it being secret, of course, because it's so unconscionable. What other developed nation would deliberately dismantle its irrigation system in the face of, growing demand for its produce? One of the extraordinary problems that the mid-term review identified was the fact that it is based on false assumptions. The false assumption was that farmers wanted to be shut down because, after all, they'd sold their water to Penny Wong, then Minister of the Environment. They hadn't wanted to do that. They were forced by the banks to relieve their debt accumulated through the drought. So that was a false assumption. Farmers do not want to be shut down. Farmers have a viable enterprise. Many still own their water, but they're being forced to agree to plans where they will no longer be viable as dairy farmers and where their communities around them are collapsing. Just 6 children left at the Invergordon school when there were 60 not very long ago. So this is an extraordinary case, and some we should all be deeply ashamed about, and we need to fix it.